Okay, just about ready to go. Councillor Fitzgerald. We just need to see you and we're set. There. All right. Council, welcome. Generally, we're down in the great town of Port Sydney at our August council meeting, but this year we're still on the screen. So the meeting is being held electronically in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act. I will now call upon the clerk to conduct a roll call of committee present.
Please physically raise your hand when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Nancy Alcock. Councillor Dan Harmer. Councillor Jason Fitzgerald. Councillor Dion Schumacher. Councillor Bob Stone. Councillor Brian Thompson. Councillor Jonathan Weed. Councillor Tim Whitby. And Mayor Karen Terziano. Thank you. We have quorum.
Thank you. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Stone. Be it resolved that the regular council meeting agenda dated Monday, August 24th, 2020 be adopted as printed and circulated. Questions? All in favor? And that's carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Oh, nothing. All right. So our first report tonight is from our CAO, Denise Corey, on the Craig Attainable Housing Development. Denise?
Thank you, Your Worship. So as Council is aware, we have entered into an attainable housing agreement with Craig Developments, Inc. And it's currently with Teresa Oliver, who is also available to answer any questions that you have today. So within the agreement, it talks about the different phases that the developments are to occur. There are 3 phases, each of them with a deadline where the project was to be completed by. Phase 1 actually is comprised of 2 different parts. The first part was the 8 townhouses that was to be completed by August the 30th of 2020. And the second part was to be completed 16 townhouses by August 30th of 2021. For reasons outlined in the report, specifically just with the delay of information that was required by the town, as well as COVID, there have been a number of delays experienced by the developer, and to be able to meet any of the dates outlined in the agreement are not achievable. So Ms. Oliver has come forward today requesting slight amendments to the agreement to all 3 phases. The first 2 being pushed out ever so slightly, a bit more than a year, and the following 2 would be an extension of 1 year on the contract. So the agreement currently does allow for a 1-year extension to the dates, but due to the fact that both parties, if they are in agreement to proceed with the extended addition of the extension of the phase 1, would be permissible within the current agreement. So the developer is before us today to request an extension of those completion dates. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you. Teresa, do you want to add anything before we go to questions? You just need to unmute, Teresa.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions, I think everyone can appreciate it's been an interesting year with COVID, and we also we had to update the drainage plan with the permits. It turns out the first 8 townhouses, we couldn't just go and start them without having a drainage plan for the entire 5 acres, because it actually is a drainage point. It's a collection point, and the CBO had some real concerns about where that water would go. So we ended up having to do another 6 months design on the drainage plan during COVID. So ended up in this sort of situation. So hoping that that can be taken into consideration.
Okay. Are there questions from council for either the CAO or Teresa? Councillor or Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Teresa and Denise, for the report. I certainly will support the report, but I do have a question because I have forgotten. I know, Teresa, that you received building permits for the first 8 townhouses.
Yes.
And so I just need to be reminded, if you got the permits, then why can't you proceed with the 8 townhouses? Because
We
the
can.
drainage,
Yeah, we only recently got the permits. We got them a couple of weeks ago, and right now we're mobilizing machinery to get down there. So we have to plan excavators and that, so we'll be down there very shortly. Yep, we've got them, and machines are being planned right now.
So in fact, the revised agreement is saying that we're actually moving that deadline out to 2022. So that, in fact, they'll be online well before that.
We're hoping. Let me just explain though, we've got 5 acres of drainage to prepare, which is substantial. So if you know anything about how drainage works with this kind of property is like an alluvial plain where over years, the kind of deposit that's collected is very muddy and swampy. And if you know anything about building foundations, you can't build foundations in that type of substance. So we literally have to scrape it all out and put new fill in, engineer it, and compact it every foot to meet the compaction requirements that the engineers will pass the foundation on, which is a huge amount of work. We basically have to scrape everything out, compact it back 1 foot at a time, which is an excruciating amount of earthwork. So that's going to take a lot of time. We'd like to get ahead of the timeline, but we've got a lot of earthworks that actually have to go in there that you won't see the benefit of that. It's just work that's got to be done before you can put a foundation in that type of soil.
Okay, I appreciate the explanation. I had forgotten. I think you actually told me that before, and I'd forgotten. So I was fixated. You had the 8 permits, so I thought, oh, that's so great. But that makes a whole lot of sense. And so I'll have my fingers crossed that maybe it's sooner, but it's good to be safe.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's one of those situations where you have trashy soil. You pretty much have to scrape it all out and rebuild from the foundation up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? Okay, I will read the resolution. I forgot to do that. Moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Alcock. Be it resolved that council approves the request from the developer, Craig Development Inc., to amend the timelines within the Attainable Housing Agreement, Section 14D, 1, 2, and 3 as follows. Phase 1, Part 1, August 30th, 2022. Phase 1, Part 2, August 30th, 2023. Phase 2, August 30th, 2025. And Phase 3, November 30th, 2029. And further, that all legal costs for fees, disbursements, and applicable taxes incurred by the town as a result of the amending agreement be borne by the developer. And further, that said amending agreement be completed to the satisfaction of the Chief Administrative Officer and the town's legal counsel. Final questions. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one. With regards to the dates that we're looking at here, is this the completion date target or the beginning date target?
The completion date. It's the date when you have occupancy date.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Teresa?
Occupancy. It's the occupancy date.
So completion dates.
Yeah, completion date. Date of occupancy.
Okay.
And occupancy is sometimes 95%, depending on the situation with the CBO, or 100% complete. It's occupiable. You can move in.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you, Teresa, for being here.
Thank you so much.
Our next item of business is Streetscape, and Director Hernan is here to present with our design consultant EXP. Steve?
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. And yes, Les Rant is here. He's the lead for the project for EXP, senior consultant. So what council has in their agenda package is what we call 60% complete construction drawings. Just the landscape. We do have the full civil drawings, and I've got lots of drawings I can share and discuss with council and go through. We didn't include the complete civil package because, to be honest with you, they're very confusing to read. You've got to have a look at them on a large screen, and you have to understand what you're actually reading and seeing. But they are available to share if anybody wants to see them, if anybody wants to see the placement of the pipes and how deep in the ground they're going to be and how they're actually connecting up to the sewer pipes and stormwater and things like that. So those drawings are 60% complete. They're called 60% complete. That's what they call them in the construction industry. These are tender-ready drawings. So if council approves these drawings today, we will be going out. We are going out very shortly for requests for proposal to pre-qualify the companies that want to build on this project. And we do have to include these drawings with it so that at least they understand the scope of the work and the size of the project. From there, once we've pre-qualified the selected few, they will then get a chance to bid on the final tender package, which will obviously include these drawings and more details as we go, speaking in detail to things such as the street lights and all that. All the street lights have been placed on these drawings, and we can show you. We have designed them with the electrical plugs available 24/7. So if somebody wants to plug in and run a street event, all that sort of stuff has been looked after. There was a request for the bollards, removable bollards. They have been added to the drawings as well, at Center Street in Main and also at Main and Burnell Road, a removable bollard. And we've asked them to be placed into the tender package as a provisional item. And what a provisional item is, it's an option. And once we get the pricing on it, council will decide on multiple different things that we'll put in as provisional items, whether they want to expand it or leave it in the contract, take it out. If we don't include it in the original tender package and we start adding things as the contract is already written, that's when it gets real expensive. So we try and include as many things as we can. We carry provisional pricing for concrete work, even though we don't know where some of it might go, provisional pricing for extra asphalt, even though we don't know where it's going to go. That way, if we get into a job and realize that we have to take asphalt further up a side street, we're not paying a premium for it. We know up front what the fixed cost is. So I'd be happy to, maybe I'm going to share my screen. And if you have any questions, Les and I can answer them. And maybe Les, you can turn your video and your mic on too, so we know if, and share. So I've got multiple drawings up, and hopefully my computer won't crash. This is just to show you the first drawing you're looking at here is actual one of the civil drawings starting up on Lawrence Street. And like I say, it's got all the gas lines, it's got all the sewer, the water connections, the manholes, everything relates, all the numbers relate to something. So we could go right into the detail and tell you any detail that you want. The drawings that were included in your council package were a much friendlier version, and it's the streetscape, because these are the ones that the people see, that the layperson understands, and it's a much cleaner drawing that you can look at it and understand what you're looking at. So this is right out of your council package. Just as an example. So what you're looking at is obviously the road space is in here where my pointer is, and that the gray area indicates the new sidewalks which are being placed in. These large round circles, if you will, with the black mat underneath them, those are your soil cells in your trees. So if you go through these drawings and count them up, you'll see that there's over 40 trees on Main Street itself. And then we have additional tree planting down King Street and additional tree planting in Kent Park. So there's plenty of trees. And you can walk through these drawings. We can walk you through. We can answer any questions that you might have. We can go into greater discussion. I know from discussions I've had with some council members, there will be some discussions around items such as Kent Park, and that's great. I just, for a little bit of a history, if you will, because when the mayor and I were talking today, there were some questions raised about how did we get here, Steve? How did we get to where we are? How do we get from the concept to what we've got now? And just as a bit of a reminder, the planning partners came in, they did some concept drawings, they did some fancy water pastel drawings like I'm showing you on the screen here that talked about an open park with trees in it. And then when we brought EXP on, we gave them this package, and they brought back some of their first renditions. And if you remember their first rendition, which is just a concept drawing, was a big open park, flat space with a few boulders and some trees around it. And from that meeting, council said, no, we don't want this big concrete area. We want some greenery, some shrubs around it, which then created option number 2, where we went back and we said, okay, let's just keep the open space in the center with the boulders around it, and let's add the green space all the way around it. And we talked about this one, and council liked that. But council said at that time, no, we'd like a stage in the back corner. Can you go put a stage back in? Which then came to the drawing here that was presented to council some time ago. And I know because you're looking at it from a bird's eye view, it's hard to see, but this is the raised stage area. This is the street lights that were going to be carried into here to create the lighting, create the ambience for it, because there was concern about a dark park. And that was a concept drawing. Once council said, yes, we like this concept drawing, it then became a construction drawing. And that's when we get to these drawings. You can argue that this drawing is not as pretty, but to a designer, to somebody bidding the job, this is a very clear instruction drawing as to what they're building, what they're bidding on, how they're doing it. If we just gave them a fancy colored picture, they wouldn't have the detail. So when you read through all the detailed notes, and when you read through the packages of detailed notes, and that's what all these indicate, is a detailed notes attached to these. It tells you things like, yes, these are large trees. It tells you, yes, these are large boulders. They're roughly 2 feet high. They're not perfectly square. They're like a rough style boulder. And sorry about that. I think you can hear my dogs. They just came home. A large size boulder that people will be able to sit on. And we rely on the landscaping crews and the landscape architect working on this to help placement of these and the style. So not everything will be square, although this is the way it shows. And in this drawing, it talks about how many boulders, and they're 5 tons a piece that they're pricing. I just was looking at that a few minutes ago on this costing sheet, and I think it's like 20 of these 5-ton boulders for Kent Park alone. So I can't tell you what every boulder looks like until we get down that road a little further, until they start purchasing them and bringing them through. I do know for a fact that there were some questions regarding the crosswalk. So I do have some civil drawings with the crosswalk. Maybe I can just take you there because I know there's going to be a question or two on that one. So I'll just scroll through. See if I can get there a little quicker. This is a civil drawing, but it doesn't show the crosswalk. The best drawing we've got is the one with signage. And I'll see if I can pull that one up. There it is. So a question was asked of me to run through the crosswalk one more time so they had a clear understanding of what was required for signage. So if you recall, right now we have a crosswalk, an ODOA compliant crosswalk at Burnell and Main, and another one at Center Street where it's push button control with the traffic lights. It stops the traffic for those with mobility issues or sight issues so they can cross the street safely. Originally there was talk about 2 crosswalks and the request for 2, and we had the engineering group look at that. The engineering group came back and said they can't support that. Based on the distances between the 2 existing crosswalks, they were having a hard time supporting 1, but they felt they could support 1 due to the traffic flows and the pedestrian traffic, but they could not support 2. So this was the site that was picked and discussed with council. What this crosswalk will have is it will have a push button control. It'll have a sign that looks just like the one you're looking at, somebody crossing the road, and it says stop for pedestrians. And there's flashing lights located on top of the sign on both sides. So when somebody pushes the button, the signs light up, they flash, the vehicles stop. They have to stop at these blocks which are put in place like a stop block. And this is all code requirement. And then the people can cross the street. I was asked what other signage would be required. So the first sign you run into when you come into a crosswalk is a sign down here, which is going to tell you there's a crosswalk ahead. And then you come up and there's another sign required by law that says, be prepared to stop. There's a crosswalk ahead and don't pass any cars. And then obviously if somebody's crossing the street, there's your crosswalk, there's a cross block where they would stop and the vehicles, the pedestrians could cross. This exact same setup is also on the other side of the street over in this area. I could just pull up another diagram to show it to you, but that's it in the crosswalk. And I just highlight that because I know it's going to be a discussion or some questions are around it. So Mayor Terziano, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Les can answer any questions. Les, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add at this point in time that from the overview that I've given.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Les.
Yeah, so I would just, mostly it's about Kent Park. What we presented here is what we believe to be the instructions from council, articulated into a landscape design. The questions that have come up regarding accommodating private use of some of the park. We would be pleased to do that should council wish that. So, we're not just going to jump in and do it without the council's direction. And so up to this point in time, we have not had that direction. So the landscaping has been focused on the public use of the full park area. Other than that, I think Steve, good description of the crosswalk and the other aspects of EXP's design.
Thanks, Les. I'm going to actually read the resolution. I should have done that before we started, but moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Armour. Whereas Council Resolution number 174-20 directed staff to proceed with the final drawings for the Main Street Streetscape project, and whereas design consultant EXP Services has completed 60% of the design to date, therefore be it resolved that Council approves 60% of the design work completed as attached to report OPS 2020-14 for the Main Street Streetscape project. Questions from Council? Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. And I don't know if this is out of line, me speaking, because I wasn't at the last meeting, and which is too bad. But I do appreciate, Steve, the comments about how the boulders in Kent Park would be, that's kind of a rough drawing in terms of pricing, but also to keep in mind that a real natural aesthetic, I think, is what everyone's hoping for, something that almost feels like the stones were there all along and uncovered and gives it a natural feel. I think too often we do get in the habit of trying to cut and sculpt stone and look back and think it looks far too manufactured. So I appreciate those comments. I wasn't totally, I haven't been privy to all the discussions about how the space to the south would potentially blend with the idea of a private business, either leasing a portion of it, or if there are tables to be set up for a business of some kind. I think that when we had our breakout sessions about streetscape, we talked a lot about businesses being able to sort of spill into the public space a little bit, especially given the COVID virus that we're experiencing now. And so I guess I'm still a bit hesitant with the drawing as it stands, with the stage, if you will, being in a way isolated from any potential blending of private and public lands there. So I'm hoping that we can see something that lends itself a little bit better to half a dozen tables to be able to be put out there for one business or another. I think I look down the road 10, 20 years, and I think it would be excellent foresight if we could set up for whatever business ends up there over the years to be able to give it that maybe slightly more European feel, because municipalities all over Ontario are trying desperately to figure out ways to be able to allow businesses to blend into the public space a bit better. And I think that this virus has exposed how little thought we've actually, all of us in terms of municipalities, have given to how we can mix uses. I think it can be a real win for both, not only for us as a municipality, but for the people visiting and whoever occupies that building from now until we redo streetscape. And I'm sure none of us will be on council at that time. Anyway, so those are my comments, and I hope they're well received. Thanks.
Other questions? Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I want to start thanking Councillor Weed for raising a number of those, or making those comments, and thanking Steve and Les. I realize how frustrating this must be, because you've heard from a number of us back and forth around Kent Park especially. And so I get how it's probably like throwing jelly to a wall sometimes. And so I needed to preface with that. And I again, like Councillor Weed, I appreciate Steve showing us where you got to where you did with respect to Kent Park. And because when I looked at the final drawing, I thought, this isn't what I thought I had approved. And you've heard me say that before. But I was confused as to how we got to where we did. And I appreciate the comments around the rocks, but then I look at our package and it refers to armor rock. And armor rock to me is more sort of cut stone, as opposed to, and it can be different sizes, appreciated. I think you made reference to it being 2 feet as a general rule. And I look back at what we had in front of us from the planning partnership, and it was much more free flowing. It was much more sort of native to Muskoka and sort of the boulders. And geeky as I am, I went online and looked, am I nuts? Is there a difference between, right? And there certainly is a difference between the landscape boulders versus armor rock. And armor rock, I associate with more sort of refined spaces, shoring up lovely walls and things like that, but not necessarily for what I thought we were doing in Kent Park. So again, I really appreciate all of the work you guys have done. And so it's important for me to say that. And I guess, so if we were to approve this before us, are we approving armor rock versus what I would say is the natural Muskoka rock? There's less of it in the park that I thought we had approved, rather than having a circular group of rocks that may vary in size, but they're quite circular. And if I look at the original drawing, they're scattered. They're scattered throughout the park of varying sizes that people could sit on. And I certainly was one who said, well, maybe we should have some more trees rather than the minimalist and like very little, some natural. So I wanted the combo. So I agree with that option too. But I guess the question around Kent Park is that. And there is a second question, if I may, and that is, I appreciate what Paul Myers raised with us. And I think he got to the point where he said, I don't really care if council makes a decision about whether or not they design in such a way that I will get the whatever it is so that I can connect my building. But I think it's really important that we design it in such a way that we don't negate that as a possibility down the road, so that we don't do something that there's a person that buys that building and says, I want to put in a cafe here. I want to open up the side and work out all of the things that we need to do with the town, as you rightly pointed out to Paul. But I want to make sure that we design it in such a way that that's still possible. It might be possible next year or 3 years or whatever. So for me, I needed some sort of reassurance that that's true in the drawing I look at. So those are the two questions about Kent Park specifically I have. But I do have other questions about the rest of Streetscape, but I'm happy to hear what the response is on that, if I may.
Steve, do you want to respond before I go to the next question, or?
Maybe I'll ask Les to talk to that and talk about what the landscape architect's role is in this and the boulder placements and things like that. Les, if you could deal with that one, please.
Yeah, so in regards to the actual boulders that show up the site, that's a detail that between now the 60% drawings and the final construction, they would be described so that a contractor would be able to source and put in the boulders that are required. And what I'm hearing here is that the boulders are preferred to be a bit more rustic. I'm sure we don't want them so angular that a kid can't sit on them or you can't put a sandwich on it, but that it would be on the more rustic side. So we would, going further in our detail now, we would describe it that way. On the construction drawings, they're shown a little neater just for the sake of convenience, to show that a boulder, needs to go here. So this is part of the final detailing of the of each of the items in the landscape design, and that can be accomplished, and we can provide those, the more the rugged Muskoka type boulders. In regards to planning the park so that the business on Brunel can have access to it now or in the future, I mean, certainly that can be done. And, you know, we would be pleased to do it if council wishes that that to be accommodated. We can do that. We just haven't heard that yet formally from council. So we just continued on our design process, you know, until we hear that direction. So we'd be pleased to do that.
May I just follow up on that, Your Worship? Or
Sure.
I just want to be sure that, so I wasn't actually saying, and this is just me, so council obviously has to weigh in, but I wasn't saying, let's respond to Paul and do what he's asking. I just would like to know that whatever we agree to do, that it doesn't prohibit that from happening at a later stage. So I'm not saying, let's build that ramp, let's do that. I'm just saying, I don't know if we want to put something in the way so that if that should come to pass, that we have to completely reconstruct something in that area. So I think there's a subtle difference in what I'm saying. And on the boulder, I really appreciate your response, Les. I very much do. But I'll go back to that thing. So if we approve this, we're going out saying we want Armor Rock, and Armor Rock, as far as I understand, unless you tell me I'm wrong, is different from the natural boulder. Armor Rock is very sort of, it's cut. And again, maybe this doesn't matter to the rest of the council. I've made my point. That matters to me, but you know, maybe it doesn't to the rest of council.
Steve, did you have something to add there?
I just, if with your permission, I'd like to share my screen again.
Okay.
Just to bring Kent Park up. Is that the one I need? So the building we're talking to the south, it would be this face along here. So there is some shrubs being planted in here right now is the intent to green and soften that space. But down the road, if council wishes and the building owner cuts a deal, there's nothing to stop the shrubs from coming out and a patio from going in. This right now is just a placeholder for that little kiosk that we have down there now, that we all know could be moved at any time, but that was just sort of placed there and said, that's a good spot for the information booth. Doesn't need to be there, could be put on a truck and moved away. It does have a raised stage in the back corner as we were directed by council to put in. I think it's about 17, 18 inches is the plan for it right now. So it doesn't need huge railings around it and the ramps easily work on it. But down the road, could the building owner here do something out the side? We're talking some minor shrubbery that would come out when you look at it. There's no street lights planned for there right now. They're more over by the stage. There's nothing that would be prohibitive, if you will. Worst case scenario, there is one large tree going in, and if somebody waited 40 years to come along and do something, we might have to cut a large tree down. But there's nothing that precludes that from happening. Same with the other side. The other building owner on the other side, there is an alleyway between the two right now. But once again, there's nothing in here that's permanent that can't be easily moved if council wishes, whether it's next year, 10 years from now, or whenever that might come to fruition. So I just wanted to show you that drawing again. There's nothing permanent there. There's no concrete sidewalks. There's no infrastructure going in there that would preclude the opportunity to move forward with it. And stop sharing screen. There we go.
Okay. Thank you for that, Steve. I appreciate that. That's very clear. So,
Councillor Fitzgerald, I believe you are next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to thank Councillor Wiebe and Deputy Mayor Alcock for their comments. Well received. I really appreciate, Steve, what you've explained to us about how in the future these things can be realized without great distress or work involved. And I think that in equitable fashion to all the taxpayers, we've left flexibility in design. And if one of those business owners decides that they do want to do something, that they can enter an agreement with the town and it's equitable for everyone who's going to enjoy the park. So I like the design. I like the process that we went through, that we made together to come up with this final design. So I'm looking forward to approving this and going out for tender. Thank you.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. Just to echo that, I'm looking forward to moving ahead on this. I think with the rocks, some natural rock in there, it's great. I don't like the round boulders, but I think you can find natural rock that isn't cut. And for the businesses, I think that's something for later on down the road. I hate to see this project held up any longer, and I'm willing to support this tonight and move ahead.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Stone?
Just a couple comments. I don't disagree with a lot of what I'm hearing. The rocks should look like they just are. They're part of the natural landscape we see everywhere else. I would like to see a electrical outlet in the center of that area, so that now sunken down, so nobody trips over it, obviously, but so we can put up a Christmas tree there yearly. I think now's the time to do something like that. It should be the circle, and the plan right now does seem a little bit stark or prescribed. We talk about Muskoka moments that we were hoping to see along the street, and we have in the park as well. This should be the premier Muskoka moment for us, and it is a perfect circle. And if it were me, I'd shake it up a little bit on the edges. But having said all that, I'm happy to live with it as it is right now.
Councillor Schumacher.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with pretty much everything said. To what Councillor Stone suggested with the Christmas tree lighting, are we also not going to still have that movable kiosk that'll be down there for the Silver Ambassadors and for the BIA to be able to create that Christmas feel with that little cabinet thing they've got going on there? Is that still part of? I think we discussed them being able to have that little shed unit that the Silver Ambassadors use and the little kiosk for Christmas.
I think Steve showed that one drawing. There is a placeholder for a spot for that to be, whether or not it's that actual building or another one or something different. But yeah. There's still a spot for it.
If we design something, you know, that sort of suits to that, but as long as we can still have a spot for it.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on, Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just lastly, when the actual, the days come where the actual design is happening, the rocks are being placed, the trees are being decided on, where does that ultimately fall? Does that fall with Les in your department, or like I guess what I'm asking is who's the artist at the helm for this one?
Yeah, so during critical times, the landscape architect, Sally Wang, will be on site to direct the final placement. So, in regards to maybe roughening is not the right word, but to making the edges of that circle just a little more natural. The boulders will be different sizes. They're shown conceptually on the drawing, but they'll be different sizes, and Sally, would place them with a little bit of a randomness around the edge. So it would be her responsibility.
Councillor Stone, and then Deputy Mayor Alcock.
So are we moving on from Kent Park? Because I'd like to talk about the walkway.
Let's just finish up with Kent Park. We won't pass any resolutions till we've gone through everything. Deputy Mayor Alcock, something further on Kent Park?
Very short. I'm glad that Councillor Wiebe asked that question. I think when it comes, and I'm sure Sally will be tremendous, that's her job. It would be lovely if we had an opportunity just to maybe be part of that at some point. Yeah, I'm not saying we're slowing the process, but just somehow when it actually happens, it'll be an exciting time to see that. And just if there's a way that we might have input, I don't know. I just throw that out there.
Okay. All right, if we've sort of exhausted Kent Park, and I'm just going to weigh in and say I agree with many of the comments. It's always been my hope that this area look like a park and not an event space, and not a Toronto City Park, but an actual Muskoka Park. So I think we've talked about the natural rock enough to realize that we want it to be natural to Huntsville, and also the whole idea of it not looking like a city circle down in the middle of Toronto, but very much a Muskoka Park in the corner of Huntsville. There were some questions about other parts of the streetscape. Councillor Stone, I think you were first.
Thank you. Yes. So as Steve mentioned, the engineers said we don't need a crosswalk between the one at Burnell and the one at Center. But there was some desire on council to put one in or two. I don't think anybody on council realized that there was going to be 6 big signs, and 2 of them are going to have flashing lights on them, right in the middle of our main street. I really don't think the crosswalk is necessary, and I would like to see it removed because of these factors.
Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I respectfully don't agree. I don't think the signs, they're going to be perpendicular to the buildings. They'll be facing traffic. They are normal and usual and required. And with the mayhem that happens on busy Main Street in the summer with people just running back and forth across the street randomly, I think it's a safety concern. And I don't think, like, there's a lot of signs everywhere. Nobody's going to really notice these as they're perpendicular to the buildings and facing traffic where they're supposed to go. So I believe that the engineers couldn't sign off on 2. I think 1 is better than none for sure, even though there is the crossings up Burnell. But up that end of that part of town, people are running back and forth all the time, and it's very dangerous. So that, I think, trumps whatever issues there are with a couple of more signs. Thanks.
Are there any other comments specific to the crosswalk? Let's stay on one subject at a time. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate what Councillor Stone is saying. I guess, though, I did support the idea of having a crosswalk. And my question would be, for some reason, I keep thinking that I recognize there are requirements and things we must do as far as legislation. I just would want to know that we've done this again in the minimalist fashion, but also meeting requirements. So it seems, when I looked at it again, when you described it, Steve, what we've got are the flashing lights. So someone pushes a button, the flashing light, but as soon as they're across, it stops. We have the signage that is absolutely required, nothing more. And then that's it, right? So I guess my question is, have we done the absolute minimal? Is there anything that we could remove, or is this the minimum?
Les?
Yeah, it's the absolute minimum legally that we can design for while having it AODA compliant based on traffic and pedestrian volume. So it's the minimal.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think I do support the idea of a crosswalk, and if the signage, can be placed in, I think I still support it, but I do understand Councillor Stone's comments.
Councillor Schumacher?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of the crosswalk. I'm in favor of what Councillor Withey has said. I do agree that there is, I've been downtown the last couple of weekends. You see a number of people crossing back and forth on that street. So Been to other towns in Muskoka that have crosswalks in the middle of their main street with their signage that's up. I realize maybe some of them aren't fully to AODA compliance, but it seems to work through, you know, Bracebridge, Gravenhurst. They have various ones and it seems to work for them as well. So I don't see why it wouldn't work for us. We'd have the minimal signage that's required, but we have to have what is AODA. And I assume, Steve, it's going to beep and do all the bells and whistles, like you said, that it's going to have to for AODA compliance. And I mean, I think it's going to make the street that much safer.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I would agree with the comments from Councillor Withy as well, and Councillor Schumacher. I know that in Bracebridge they have a signed crosswalk, and it's not a big problem. I think the other side of it too is for those who can cross the street, say at Burnell and then at Center Street, no problem, there are lights. But for those who really need to cross the street safely, then this is really designed for them at that particular location. So it gives really 3 locations on our main street where people can safely cross the street, I would say. So I think we really have to leave it in.
Councillor Schumacher?
Sorry again. And I mean, I think it blends into that feel that we're looking with at King Street, becoming a pedestrian walkway area that blends to that crosswalk, and being able to have people the ability to say park in behind, walk over to the theater. Hopefully at some point it will reopen, or have that pedestrian, as Councillor Weeb had said back with the Kent Park thing. We want sort of that European feel, and there's a lot of towns that are trying to go to that European feel of making it more pedestrian friendly. And I think the idea of having that crosswalk makes it more pedestrian friendly. And as COVID has become more prevalent, we're seeing people needing their space and needing space to walk and trying to keep the distance that we need. So I think it blends well to be able to have that and the ability for people to cross and maybe avoid each other on the sidewalks as much as possible, and have some ability to.
Okay. Are there any other specific questions to any other parts of this package? Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Sorry, I thank you, Your Worship, and I promise there are just a couple of things. I realize that we want approval of this tonight, so I do have a couple of other questions. As far as some of the detail, it goes along the main street. I know we've got an example of a park bench, and so I looked up actually the company that makes it, and it looks like a good company. It's made, I think, out of recyclable material, and maybe Les, you can respond to that because that's cool. And Canadian made, that's also cool. But I wasn't sure when we talked about Muskoka Moments on the main street, we saw some of the drawings that had some rock, it had the indigenous trees or natural or trees or you know, shrub, whatever it is. And there were some suggestions, and I don't recall seeing where we talked about putting the park benches. And so maybe I've forgotten, and we did. So I was just curious where the park bench is going. And then there's another drawing there about stepping stones. And I wasn't sure where the stepping stones were going in on this main street. So maybe a response, or maybe that's just an example, like the bike rings. And I love the bike rings, they're great. And they're really important, so that's great. I'd love to know if there's a thought where those benches are going, and if that's part of the Muskoka Moments, and when we made that decision.
Steve or Les, who wants to take that one?
I'm going to ask Les to touch on that. It goes back to, I believe, what he's going to tell us though is when Sally Wong's on site, looking at the placement of little Muskoka Moments and where things fit and how they fit. But I'm just trying to look through the drawing at the same time to see where they've put for placements of the bike racks and things like that. Les?
Yeah, you'd have to bring the drawings up. As far as the steps, the one area that we have the steps spec would be leading from that center area of Kent Park up to the, you know, in quote, stage area. So I believe the detail of those steps was for that. As far as the benches, yeah, just offhand, I'm not sure exactly where they might be, but in improving these drawings, what we may want to do is get some more details then on the fixtures. And that's, you know, the detailing going from 60% to the tender set. We can, through Steve, we can run, you know, some of the fixture options, just get more detail and color picture on those. And they would then show up on the final drawing. You know, it's just a matter of the detailing of those fixtures.
Deputy Mayor Alcock?
I appreciate both of the responses. Again, on the bike rings, they're great. I think they should be everywhere. So that's me. And I do appreciate that maybe there's further discussion post 60% around the fixtures, because again, if you're talking about Muskoka moments, I don't recall the pictures having the benches, but I think that maybe that's important. Maybe there are places for those. And as I said, the bench that you've got there looks like it's good. But I do think that there's much more discussion that should take place around the right fixtures so that we have the Muskoka moment feel throughout the entire street and leading right into Kent Park. So there's a consistency. And I don't think council has spent a lot of time on that kind of detail. And we're spending so much money on this. I just really, really want us to you know, be engaged and get it right. And so I would certainly appreciate more discussion around those fixtures when it's time. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Is council comfortable with me? I've read the motion. Is council comfortable with me calling the question on streetscape at 60%? Then I will. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries. Thanks, Les. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Withey, seconded by Councillor Schumacher. Be it resolved that the following council meeting minutes be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Special council, July 27th, 2020, and regular council, July 27th, 2020. Questions? All in favor? And that carries. Reports from committees. First is the Library Board, and the minutes from the Library Board of June 9th are fairly old, as it's now late August. But I do have a little bit of update from the library, and that's that our new CEO, David Tremblay, is now in town and hard at work at the library. I'm not sure if council recalls, but David worked for a while from out west because we were in COVID and it didn't matter where he was working from, but he has relocated his family here. The library is closed right now, and I'm not sure if council's fully aware, but it's closed due to some ongoing drainage issues. As most have probably seen, a lot of the building is dug up. It's been looked at by engineers, and there's a report that will be coming back soon to see what kind of repairs need to happen, because there is definitely leakage. At this point, it looks like best case scenario may mean that the library will not reopen until mid-October. And if there's any questions, happy to answer them. Okay, BIA Board of Management minutes, Councillor Stone.
So the board has been concentrating on the pandemic and the reopening of the businesses up until now. As of tomorrow morning at our next board meeting, we're going to start working towards planning for streetscape. I just heard about a half an hour ago that grant approval of $18,000 came through for the Digital Main Street Squad, which is going to assist 72 businesses, not just in the BAA, but 72 of our businesses. And everyone should know that, generally speaking, sales are very good downtown.
Thank you. Questions? Because you're still up, Councillor Stone, with the Committee of Adjustment minutes?
Yeah, there was nothing controversial or out of the norm at our meeting, and people are really happy to get on with their projects.
Questions? Councillor Wiebe, Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not much to report, but there is discussions ongoing about increasing the level of PPE and support for the businesses.
Questions? Councillor Schumacher.
Mine's actually to Councillor Stone for BIA. I know we have a report coming up about opening of the ice surface and the Summit Center, but are the BIA, are they going to start talking about the ice surface that they had created downtown? Will that be on the agenda coming up September, October, as people may want a open air ice surface again?
Yes, I believe the BIA is still planning on doing the ice rink downtown and may even be expanding it.
Perfect.
Municipal accommodation tax tourism update. That committee meets almost every 2 weeks, looking for ways to continue to bring people to our town. They've got a new program coming up for, I'm going to say mid-September to late October, to bring the traveling public here midweek. So some incentive vouchers to come and stay here and spend your money in Huntsville. So that's that program worked really well last winter, and hopefully it'll work well this fall. Any questions on that one? Deputy Mayor Alcock, Planning Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't be long. Like Councillor Stone, it was pretty straightforward at planning. I thought it worth noting, though, that we approved an application with respect to 18 Legacy Lane, and it was an application for in support of 33 townhouse units. And the last time we dealt with the same developer and their previous proposal, we had a lot of problems with it because it was proposed that it would be built, and the lane that would be used would be Legacy Lane. And almost everybody who lived in that area had huge problems because of the existing traffic. So I commend the developer and their consultant in this case, because they went back to the drawing board, acquired some neighboring property on Haynes Road, and worked with our town staff and came up with an alternate exit and entrance that now comes off of Haynes Road. And so now that we were quite pleased to support their application for 33 townhouse units. So I just thought that was important, that sometimes, you know, you have good back and forth with our clients, and this, I think, was one. So I thought that was worth noting.
Okay. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Stone. Be it resolved that the Planning Committee meeting minutes dated August 20th, 2020, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any questions? All in favor? It carries. I've got to get back on track and read these first. So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Fitzgerald and seconded by Councillor Alcock. Be it resolved that the town enter into the following agreements as outlined in Report Development 2020-65 for the purposes of the development of a publicly accessible mountain bike trail. A trail lease agreement with Hidden Valley Highland Ski Area, Schedule A, and a trail development and maintenance agreement with the Huntsville Mountain Bike Association, Schedule B. Mr. Oval, you're here. Do you want to go through that report?
Fairly straightforward, Your Worship. Thank you for having me. We were able to address and kudos to our partners in this process to address all the issues that were raised by our insurance provider. So we vetted them through our lawyers and our insurance providers, and everyone's pretty happy. So,
Are there any questions on the agreements? Councillor Alcock.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just want to thank Mr. Oval for working with the partners, and I'm so thrilled that we have this before us, and that I certainly am supporting it. So thank you.
thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was involved in a very minor role trying to make this happen. I was contacted by a lot of members of the group, and I think it's a great example of partnerships that we can form with community groups and members to further recreation for everyone in the community. That's going to become a multi-use trail, not only for the Mountain Bike Association. So good work, Mr. Oval, and let's look at other opportunities so we can enhance things in our community for all of our visitors and people that live here. Good work.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Carries. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Schumacher. Be it resolved that staff be directed to phase in the reopening of the Canada Summit Centre Don Lock Arena ice surface according to safety guidelines, and further that ice rental programs be phased in from the middle to end of September 2020, and further that notwithstanding the ice allocation procedure number CS Sales 004, Council approves staff to arrange scheduling as deemed appropriate. Amanda, welcome.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm here to discuss the reopening of the arena, the Canada Summit Centre. Recreation is essential to physical and mental health into our community. The report outlines the financial, staffing, and the ability to strategically and safely reopen the facility. Community groups are expressing interest and are excited to return to skate. Community staff, or community service staff, sorry, are working with arena user groups in other municipalities on safely reopening of the arena. The strategic phased-in approach will allow for other areas of the building to reopen. I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Thanks for that. Are there questions from council? Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say I'm really happy to see this coming before us. Definitely in favor of it. The only question I have is, in the report you mentioned not starting the ice till September 1st due to the extra cost of hydro for the extra 6 or 7 days. Is that really that significant? I think we should fire up the plant tomorrow and get things moving ahead.
There is a significant cost to starting up the plant earlier in a previous month. So staff, or Pete Kingshot, has been working with our local. Sorry, he's here right now. He can answer some of these questions. I think he'll be best to do it.
Last year when we did the hydro report, we found that starting a plant in the previous month, there's a substantial charge to it. As we get paid, we get penalized for the whole month for that day. So even if we started up on the 29th of August, we would get hit for that whole month for that peak in that period.
Thanks for that.
Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was kind of hoping for a little more detail in this report with regards to specifically hockey. Having spoken to a number of acquaintances who live in other communities and listening to what their rules and regulations are, you know, as far as the specifics of how many people are there and how this is going to work, as far as, for example, the number of kids allowed per team. I had a conversation today with a local parent who was also, wondering about these things, because if we start getting this going and we don't know, I mean, if, for example, we say, okay, there's going to be House League this year, but as in some other communities, we're only going to allow 8 kids on each team. How does minor hockey deal with that as far as the enrollment? If they get a rush of enrollment and they can only have so many, are we putting those parameters in place? As well as making them sure they come change, making sure no parents are in the building, 3-on-3 or whatever, even how all that works. I'm not against opening up the facility. I would think that if it is going to be reduced team size, et cetera, that you can make the case for opening up both rinks right away. I think that there also should be a plan in place as to what happens should we have a COVID outbreak. How do we shut it back down? How do we pull it back? What are the things we're doing around that? So when I saw this on the agenda, I went right into the report and been through it a few times. And there's a lot here that I think could have been, you say reduce capacity and modified programs. Where's the detail for that? Restrictions on the number of users on each ice pad and arena change rooms. There's just no detail that I would have liked to have seen. It does say no access to the general public or any spectators at this time. How does that work with a kid that's 5 years old walking into the arena by himself, and all those kinds of things that I have questions about, as well as, what do we do if all of a sudden 5 kids on one team are diagnosed having COVID? And I'm assuming it's only House League. I understand in other communities there's no travel teams allowed. I do see there is some stuff in the news about the Junior Cs signing up players. I have heard anecdotally that a number of Toronto players who are planning to do their education remotely are planning to stay up here and have their kids play hockey up here. Mom and the kids or dad and the kids stay at the seasonal residence year round while the breadwinner goes back to the city as needed. So there's a lot coming at us with this. As I said before, I support opening things up. I hear from my own spouse about the frustration of getting this kid out of the house and doing stuff. I appreciate that. I just think I would have liked to have seen more detail here and what the plan is should something go sideways, or how in fact to deal with the different user groups as far as team size, access, all these things, and with what may happen if the worst happens. Anyways, those are my comments. I think we need to have more information, but I'm willing to take the baby steps forward, get the ice plant going, and get ready. Thank you.
I think you had a few questions in there, Councillor Withey. I don't know, Amanda or Simone, if you want to take a stab at any of the specific ones that might have easy answers to them right now, or?
Sure. So through you, we do have plans in place for everything that you just mentioned. So at the time of the report being written, Huntsville Minor Hockey had not had they didn't have from MPS a direction yet of where they could go. So since then, they have come up with a 3-on-3 league. So it's cohorts of 50. So there'll be 10 people max per team. And as you said, they won't be traveling. They can only allowed to travel throughout their own health unit. They're the district. So, Bracebridge, those kind of places would be their areas that we would travel, depending on if they choose to do that. As for entering and exiting of the building, so each of the organizations will be required to have somebody at the door, as well as our own customer service staff, to be allowing people into the building, certain people into the building at a time. Obviously, if they're at an age that they're not able to come in on their own, they will be granted permission to come in with a parent to help them get dressed. At this time, our dressing rooms won't be open, so we have 2 different areas for people to sit and to get ready. So not one, so the people that will be on the ice will be in one section, and they'll be out skating, and then as they get off the ice, you know, that station will be cleaned, and we'll have another area for people that are now going to be on the ice to get on the ice as well. If something happens, we have considered, you know, what would happen if there was another case of COVID to come through, a second wave. We'll be following the direction of the provincial government, our local health units, determining the length of time that we may be shut down. You know, that we could look at if we had to, you know, raise the temperature of the arena, shut down the lights, lock it up so that, you know, everything stays cool in there, to we might have to take it out based on the duration, obviously, of how long this could be happening. I think I've answered most of your questions, Councillor Withey. Anything else that I missed? Sorry.
Follow up, Councillor?
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, Worship. Yeah, it would have been nice to see this stuff in the report. What happens, for example, I skate, and, you know, I was speaking with our sort of group convener about what are our rules, because, you know, I'm of an age where I need lots of players on the bench to sub off of, or you better make sure your defibrillators are charged up. If you're telling me I can only play 3-on-3 on Olympic ice with 1 spare, that's not going to be happening. So at least for a lot of people that I've talked to, including myself. So just, you know, it would have been nice to see all that in the report. That's what I'm saying. And, you know, I remain concerned. I don't think personally this virus is going anywhere for a couple of years. And there's going to be new normals that we're going to have to get used to here.
So we will be coming out with a return to skate guidelines for the building that everybody will be, they will be shared with all their user groups, so including your ICE group, and you'll have the details on what's going to happen, what's happening when you arrive. And for your men's leagues, they won't be 3-on-3 unless you guys determine that. It will be you know, bench based on physical distancing, and then we'll be able to spread out into the around the bowl as it's all rubber floored. So you'll be safe there.
Can I request that you share that with us too, because we're getting calls
Sure,
with these kinds of questions. So I'd appreciate if, whether it's the next meeting we have or before that, if you can send stuff out so we have the answers when we get calls from concerned parents.
Sure, well, I'll work with Denise on sending it out.
And in my case, maybe somewhat concerned wives, but some days I'm not so sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Schumacher, I think you were next. Except I think maybe your screen is frozen.
It was. I don't know if I still am.
No.
Yeah, no, through you, I'm happy to see this get underway. I did read, Amanda, in your report, so no general or public access until the limit expands, I guess, past 50. So no public skating on Friday nights or Saturdays for people who want to take their kids out. I guess that's why I sort of asked Councillor Stone earlier, hopefully that outdoor rink or outdoor spaces that we will have available for people to be able to publicly get out when weather depending, is that's probably going to be the only opportunity maybe this year for people to publicly skate?
No, we will, we're looking at opening up programming as well, but first will be just the gradual reopening and just getting our, you know, the organizations out on the ice first. We have the ability to do drop-in programs through a pre-registration program. So you can register online for the program. So we know exactly who's in the building and we have contact information at that any time. So we do have plans to reopen to the public. It's just going to be by appointment only.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Amanda, I'm just curious with the high school, as kids are getting out of school and if they say it's figure skating, et cetera, will there be areas for them to change, or will they have to show up with their equipment on ready to go?
Through you, Your Worship, we are working with that as well. So plans will be to have them, there will be washroom facilities available if we need to open up a dressing room for those right after school programs. So any of the groups that are on right away after school, then that will be something that we can consider for sure.
Okay, are we, Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick follow-up that popped into my head there about mask protocol around some of this stuff as well. Just if there's any further detail you can throw on that other than the obvious. Thanks.
So they will need a mask on as soon as they enter the building while they're getting dressed or getting their skates on. But when they get on the ice, they're not required to have a mask. I believe coaches are required in one of the earlier reports that I have read through their associates and guidelines, but I'm not sure for hockey. I know for skating for sure, but masks are required until they're on the ice.
And I know Morven's next, but I'm sure there's not mask required while you're swimming, but everywhere else.
Yeah, no, that would be difficult.
Okay, I've got to call the question. All in favor of opening the ice resurface? And that's carried. And Amanda, thank you very much. I know it's not easy to schedule ice at the best of times, let alone during COVID. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Our next one is the pool. Morven, and I have a resolution moved by Councillor Schumacher and seconded by Councillor Wiebe. Be it resolved that staff be directed to reopen the Canada Summit Centre Centennial Pool according to safety guidelines, and further that aquatic programs be phased in from the middle to end of September 2020. Morven?
Well, as you will recall, this is our second report dealing with the reopening of the pool. When we came to council at the end of June, although there were many good reasons to get the pool open, the financial cost was such that we could not in good faith recommend reopening. Circumstances have changed since then, and this report outlines a lot of the changes. You will also have read the negative effect to our staffing situation if the pool remains closed. And if we lose staff, we lose aquatic programs. And that means that we are not meeting council's goal of a healthy, active lifestyle, because the pool is so essential to that. For these reasons, we are recommending that the pool reopen mid-September with programs being phased in towards the end of September. And I can answer any questions.
Thanks for that. Are there questions from council? Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not a question. I thought it was a great report, and I absolutely support this. I've been approached by a number of people who would love to see the pool open, and I think that it was nicely laid out as to how it will be done. So yes, I'll be supporting this for sure.
Councillor Armour?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Morgan. Just a quick question with people coming in to swim. I think you said you're up to 7 or 8 people could be in the dressing room at one time. Is there going to be a screening done prior to getting into the dressing room and afterwards?
Definitely. Because the building is not going to be open to the public, customer service will be meeting them at the door, and a screening will be done at that point. Then they'll be allowed to proceed around our traffic circle to the pool office. They'll be given designated places to stand or sit while they're waiting to get into the change room. And then when the change room is available for them, they will be called and they can go in for their time in the change room. But yes, they will be screened when customer service lets them in the front door.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Worship. And I'm sorry, that sort of triggered a question I did have when I read the note. So, Morven, how does it work if you just are going for a lap swim? There's some in the report, it made a mention of phoning first or something like that. Can you just walk through that as someone who likes to lap swim? I just want to know how that works. Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Terziano. So before we actually open, we're going to use our Perfect Minds database to get in touch with everyone to let them know what is happening. So the letter that goes out to our participants will explain that they do have to call in and make a reservation. So there will be no such thing as drop-in. What used to be drop-in will now be reserved spot.
Okay. No further questions? I'll call the question. All in favor, reopening the pool? And that carries. Thanks, Morven.
Thank you.
Just before we leave recreation, I know every month we've tried to sort of highlight somebody special in the community that has done something through COVID. And because we're in recreation right now, I want to take this time to thank Mary Spring for organizing and leading the way on some social distancing opportunity for kids this summer. Mary, with the assistance of Jim and Lorna Popovsky, I hope I said that right, provided instruction to kids for pickleball over at the Meadow Park Court. I think the kids were aged 9 to 13. Traditionally a seniors game, but they taught the kids loved it. They all used their own different colored balls and practiced all the rules. And so I think it's really important that we thank Mary and Jim and Lorna for doing something special for the kids that were kind of isolated through this COVID. And I also want to thank Mary Spring again and Terry Howell, who coordinated the COVID quilt, where everyone in the community was invited to make a square for the quilt. And everybody knows we have the Canada 150 quilt that Mary and Terry did now 3 years ago, I guess, and it hangs down in the front lobby off Main Street. So the COVID quilt is done, and I think we found a place in that same lobby to hang it, and hopefully we'll get that up soon. And Matt Huddleston, that's down in that lobby all the time, tells me that the Canada 150 quilt is admired nonstop. So hopefully the COVID quilt will be that. So Mary and Terry, thank you for that too. Okay, we are on to Fairburn letter of intent and CAO Corey. And first I've got a resolution moved by Councillor Withey and seconded by Councillor Thompson. Be it resolved that council exempts the acquisition and disposition of the Fairburn lot identified in the tri-party agreement between the town of Huntsville, 1901364 Ontario Inc. and the Huntsville District Nursing Home Inc. from bylaw 2018-100, acquisition and disposition of land, leasing and granting of license of occupation. And further, that a bylaw be presented to council to address said property assumption and disposition. And further, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign any necessary documentation to facilitate the transfer of land from 19011364 Ontario Inc. to the town of Huntsville and subsequently to the Huntsville District Nursing Home. And further, that all legal fees associated with the property transfers be taken from the corporate legal budget. CAO Corey.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as council is aware, we did enter into a tri-party agreement with the parties that the mayor just indicated in the resolution. And we were to participate in contributing funds toward the development of the road. And in exchange for that, the property developer, the owner of the land, was going to exchange a parcel of property that will go to Fairburn for the development of Fairburn. So what would activate that transfer is the town of Huntsville had to complete initial acceptance of the road, which I have just been advised a few weeks ago from the Director of Operations that we have in fact taken initial acceptance of that road. So that does activate the property transfer. And as you're also aware, we do have a bylaw, a policy that speaks to the acquisition and disposition of land that typically would have to be followed if we're doing either acquiring or disposing of property. But due to the fact that the town of Huntsville really is just the flow-through agency for this land, the agreement states that the property comes to us and then we in turn transfer that to Fairburn Nursing Home. that I am recommending that we exempt this process from our policy because we really are just a flow through agency. So we are prepared to do that transfer. A bylaw will be required, which upon council approval will come to the next council meeting. So I do believe that summarizes the report, Your Worship, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Seeing none? All in favor? And that carries. Hey, we're already at bylaws. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Alcock. Be it resolved that bylaw numbers 2020-73 to 2020-78 inclusive be reported and read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 24th day of August 2020. I need to read them? No. And you see the bylaws before you? Questions? All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Okay. AMO update. I did send a notice out to council. The AMO conference was last week. Normally it's in Ottawa, and we traveled down there. This year it was virtual, the entire conference. It was about 3.5 days long. They did an amazing job. The biggest news, I think, for all of us here in Muskoka is that Bracebridge Mayor Graydon Smith was elected president of AMO for the next 2 years, which I think is great for AMO and great for Muskoka. We had 6 delegations this year. We met with the Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, on the local share costs for hospitals. We met with the Solicitor General, Sylvia Jones, on the OPP billing model and the future of police boards, particular to Muskoka. On Tuesday, we met with the Minister of Long-Term Care, Marilee Fullerton, for enhancing funding for the future build of Fairburn, plus ongoing operating costs. Minister of Infrastructure heard us on the capital and operating costs of water and sewer in Muskoka. And we spoke with the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Finance on the MPAC billing model, and the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Infrastructure on broadband access in Muskoka. We don't usually get that many delegations. I don't know whether it was because it was of our topics or because it was virtual and everybody could get in and out of the virtual room quickly. But it was a good conference, and everything in the conference stayed online for 30 days, so it allowed you to see more than just the session that you went to. So that's an AMO update if there's any questions. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, that is a lot of delegations. Good for you. Question I have with regards to the minister and dealing with the water and sewer infrastructure here in Muskoka. Did you get any kind of feel from them? Like, is there any kind of sympathy towards our particular situation with regards to developing, I mean, first of all, the province determines, what the levels of service and so on and so forth are, but then we're up to responsible for implementing it and putting it all forward. Did you get? And I've always suggested that it was time that the province recognized us as a special area with regards to this, and we should be. I'm not saying compensated, but at least I think. Given help with regards to developing water and sewer infrastructure here in Muskoka. Did you get any sense of sympathy or anything from the minister with regards to that?
Well, they never really tipped their hat, but I have to say, our last 2 delegations that day, one was running behind, so we actually had to split the group and one half go to that. So actually, the mayor from Muskoka Lakes, Phil Harding, did the presentation on the water and sewer. And he did a very good presentation. He's the chair of Public Works down there, so very versed in water and sewer. And of course, Commissioner Stevens was there too, to sort of hit home the point of how expensive water and sewer is for us here in Muskoka. So did it make an impact? They didn't really tip their hat, but they heard us and they took the notes and they have the briefings, so hopefully. Okay, where are we in the agenda? Council correspondence, everybody's seen the council's correspondence. District of Muskoka updates. Who wants to start with that? Deputy Mayor Alcock?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just on the AMO thing, we did have also the delegation to the parliamentary assistant regarding affordable housing. Maybe you said that.
Maybe I missed.
And Chair Klink did the presentation. We also added the housing task force, and I think they found it interesting. I'm not sure that we got a lot of commitment from them, but it was another opportunity to talk about affordable housing. As to the district update, speaking of affordable housing, our committee approved, I think I mentioned this a month ago, but we did finalize the number of units under the Muskoka Affordable Housing Initiatives Program, which is a district program. We approved an expenditure of $1.5 million towards 20 new affordable housing units. Most of them are in Gravenhurst. There's one in Bracebridge, but that was great news for, Gravenhurst, and so for all of us. So that was good. Under the Community Initiatives Program, we approved a number of grants towards Pay It Forward, but as well, we created a special community grant program for the community transportation plan. I don't know if you'll recall at the last district council, there was some mention that we needed to add money in the budget for individualized transportation options that were not included in the district's transit plan going forward. So we set aside up to $25,000 so that people who feel they're not anywhere on the transit corridor, but they're isolated and they need individualized service to get to an appointment somewhere, that they can apply to the district for approval of funds towards that. So that was a good thing, and staff came up with options around that. We did the final thing I do want to mention. There were a number of other items, but I think of note for Huntsville Council is we had 2 background briefings on draft plans of subdivision. One of them is for the town of Huntsville, and it is regarding a plan of subdivision out on Forbes Hill Drive. People might recall it was for Berizik, and we approved 5 lots up on the hill, and that property has been cleared of a bunch of trees, and the applicant has come back and they're looking for an amendment to their approval, and they would like to develop 14 lots instead of the 5. So the reason why we had the background briefing on that is that we will likely be going forward and having a public planning district meeting in September to deal with that application.
Thanks for that. Will that be a joint meeting or?
Plan of subdivision, unlikely, because at this point, which is really interesting, the town has yet provided its comments to the district, our planning comments. Every time they have their application, we provide comments. We have not done that. I think they're forthcoming shortly, but it will just be at this point, my understanding is it's just the district dealing with kind of subdivision application component, but it might change. It's a great question.
Yeah, I would really like to know when that one happens, because that'd be a good one to listen in on.
Oh, most definitely. As we all know, that's right in the heart of where we've had lots of concern about clear cutting. So that was actually discussed a little bit at planning.
Okay. Councillor Thompson?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we actually had our first Public Works Committee meeting since, I guess, February or maybe even January. And so we had it last week, and it was really sort of was refreshing actually to sit around here in a Zoom's kind of a way, at least, and see my fellow councilors, fellow committee members. Anyway, we did have a good meeting. As I'm sure a lot of you will be asking with regards to curbside pickup, and there's not a lot I can tell you about that at this point, simply because a lot of the discussion was in closed session. But I think you probably are already aware the district has contracted with 2 other providers to pick up the slack on those days when WCS is not up to, at least not able to fulfill their obligations with regards to that. There is an interesting development with regards to sewage lagoons, as you may or may not be aware. Throughout Muskoka, of course, we have our wastewater treatment plants, but we also have several lagoons. Well, the majority of the lagoons, or all of the lagoons except for one, are going to be decommissioned. That is the long-range plan, with the exception of the Stevenson Lagoon, Stevenson Township Lagoon. And so that's going to be upgraded and will be the default lagoon for all of the district of Muskoka. So another $1.25 million is being spent on upgrading that. A couple of other interesting things. As you know, the district has bylaws and things like that, but actually they decided that they're going to apply for a bylaw officer, at least the one position, for full-time and 2 part-time bylaw officers for next year. And they're also looking to complement, or at least increase the public works staff by up to 6 more for next year as well. So that's pretty much it. And it was a good meeting, and lots of good stuff was handled. But unfortunately, I can't talk too much more about curbside at this point. But I'd be glad to answer any questions that the council might have.
Questions? Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Withey, Health.
Thank you, Worship. Unfortunately, I have nothing to report because I was away on holidays and single-handedly destroyed quorum. So I found out at the last minute when Amy got in touch with me. She said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in a cabin in Algonquin Park." So she said, "Oh, okay then." So nothing to report. It would have been good to get back as well because we haven't had one in so long. But we'll report next meeting.
I understand that there was a funding announcement from long-term care, though, that's going to be positive towards the Fairburn build. Is that?
Oh, do tell.
I don't have any details, so I thought you may have heard. I'm sure we'll hear at the next council then.
Yeah, I apologize, and I apologize profusely to Amy about that. I just was kind of off the radar, but
no problem. Finance Committee, pretty much mostly policy updates, yearly reports, leasing, IT, investments. Pretty boring meeting, actually. And we did adopt our financial audit, which you can imagine how exciting that was. So pretty much just dollars and cents at that meeting. And then council, the search is still ongoing for a new district CAO. I think Mr. Dubin's getting really close to his last days with us, and the district has appointed an interim CAO, acting CAO, until they fill the spot permanently. We passed a resolution to continue to provide paramedics for COVID training until COVID testing until the end of the year. And the staff came back with their plan for the community engagement strategy on inclusion and diversity, anti-racism, the IDEA program, and attached some dollars to that, $50,000. And so instead of that taking a long time, it came back very quickly. And so that's a real positive for that too. And those are probably the highlights for council. One more thing I want to highlight before we go is the Terry Fox run. I'll come right back to you. Terry Fox run is on Sunday, September 20th. It won't be an actual run this year. It'll be a virtual Terry Fox run. But somehow I think you can still register for it and do it virtually or go out and do your own thing. And we will raise the flag in the Civic Square on Monday, September 14th at 11 a.m. if anybody wants to come down and do that. That'll be our participation in it, I guess. Did I miss questions there, Deputy Mayor Alcott, before?
No, it was all good, of course. I just thought, while you mentioned the CAO replacement, we did make a decision to appoint Samantha Hastings, our current Commissioner of Community and Planning Services, as the interim for that lag between hiring a new CAO and when CAO Dubin leaves. So I just thought that was, for those who know Commissioner Hastings, that's, you know, they might find that interesting.
If there's no other new business, we're going to adjourn this meeting in a second. So is there anybody around the circle that wants to raise anything? Then I have a resolution moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that confirmation bylaw 2020-79. Hang on, I'm in the middle. Councillor Withey? Sorry, I didn't look at the screen long enough.
That's all right. And I'm sure other people are hearing about it. I'm anxiously awaiting addressing this firearms bylaw issue. Hopefully this is going to get dealt with fairly quickly. I believe we could have dealt with the boundary issue separately, but anyways, we seem to be mired in this, and I had a couple calls even today on it as well. So hopefully we can deal with that right off the hop next time around. Thanks.
I think going to September, and I agree, getting far more calls than we need on that one. So, Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just quickly wanted to send a shout out to Jess Sotheby and Three Guys at a Stove for the way they've handled the real misfortune and been at the kind of the front line of one of the issues with COVID here in Huntsville. And I just wanted to highlight his leadership and his dedication to the community and the way he handled it and got out in front and took things on head on the way it's supposed to be dealt with. So I wanted to take a moment to just to point that out, and looks like things are getting back on track for them. So
Absolutely, well said. And it's good to know that we did not have any spread of COVID from that incident. So that's great. But well said, Councillor Weed. So moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that confirmation bylaw 2020-79 be received, numbered, and read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 24th day of August 2020. All in favor? And that carries. And I have a resolution moved by Councillor Withey and seconded by Councillor Schumacher. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 6:45 p.m. All in favor? That's great. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. for